Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Ollie Barrett. Good to see you, Ollie.
Hello there, Tanvi. It's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we'll go live to Israel, claim and counterclaim on strikes on a power plant in Ukraine, and a changing of the guard. Tanvi's got the headlines.
Israel says progress made in truce talks, but Hamas denies the breakthrough as yet. Kremlin calls the Zaporizhzhia attack a terrorist activity and terms it dangerous provocation. Kiev denies the blame. At least 94 people dead in Mozambique after an unlicensed ferry boat capsizes. 26 people missing. And French and British troops swap roles in the changing of the guard ceremonies to celebrate 120 years since the signing of the Entente Cordiale. Efforts are on to reach a deal in Cairo on the truce between Israel and Hamas. In Jerusalem, Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz described the Cairo talks as the closest the side have come to a deal since a November truce under which Hamas freed dozens of hostages. Meanwhile, Hamas official said on Monday that no progress has been made at a new round of ceasefire talks in Cairo, also attended by delegations from Qatar, the United States and Israel. Hamas has reiterated on their demands, including a permanent ceasefire, the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, a return of the displaced, and an exchange of Palestinian prisoners for Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. Israel withdrew its soldiers from southern Gaza, leaving just one brigade in the area today. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that the troops were leaving to prepare for their follow-up missions.
The forces are exiting and preparing for their next missions. We saw examples of such missions in the Shifa operation and also of their coming mission in the Rafah area.
Now, the United States has said that the Israeli military's troop reduction in southern Gaza Strip appears to be a rest and refit and not necessarily indicative of any new operations for these troops. In an interview to a news channel, White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby reiterated the U.S.'s position against any ground military operation in Rafah. Kirby's remarks came as Israel's military announced it had withdrawn its forces from Khan Yunis, bringing its troop presence in the territory to one of the lowest levels since the 6-month conflict began. An Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon early on Monday resulted in the death of a field commander from the heavily armed Lebanese group Hezbollah. The United Nations warned that shelling was spreading and urged a halt to the violence. Hezbollah and the Israeli military have been exchanging fire across Lebanon's southern frontier in parallel with the Gaza war. The Israeli military identified the commander as Ali Ahmed Hassin and said he was responsible for planning and executing attacks against Israelis. DD India's Alex Cadier now joins us live from Sderot. Alex, what are the chances of seeing a breakthrough in the truce discussions in Cairo?
Well, certainly in the last few hours, both sides have been pouring cold water on the chances of a deal. Israeli officials saying a deal is simply not on the horizon, and Hamas saying that Israeli obstinance means that they also do not see a deal as possible. But all of the key players are involved in these talks. You have the head of the Israeli intelligence agency, the Israeli security agency, and you have the leadership of Hamas being mediated by the director of the CIA, Bill Burns, as well as Egyptian and Qatari officials. You also have a shifting situation on the ground in Gaza, which you may be able to see in the distance behind me as we're on the border between Israel and Gaza right now. We know that those troops have been withdrawn from central Gaza, which would allow for the evacuation of civilians back up into the central Gaza, into Khan Yunis, towards an operation in Rafah. That preparation could take a few months, meaning a 6-week ceasefire is still possible. So clearly the sides involved in these talks making it very clear no progress is being made. They don't want to raise expectations, but the conditions for these negotiations to continue and possibly reach a deal are still there, and clearly the talks that will continue. These two sides will keep having conversations through the mediators in the next 48 hours. There is a lot of pressure on Hamas from Qatari officials, Egyptian officials, to strike a deal, and a lot of pressure from the families of those hostages held in horrific conditions for 6 months to get a deal as quickly as possible. So there is appetite, there is pressure. Let's see if a deal can be reached.
And Alex, how grave are the concerns as regards to the conflict spreading to Lebanon?
Well, it's certainly on the front of every Israeli mind. Every person I've spoken to is very aware that it's a question of when that retaliation will come, not a question of if. You have a lot of people worried about what that may look like. We heard Iran saying that no Israeli embassy in the world is safe. We had intelligence sources from the United States saying that the swarms of explosive drones could be targeting Israeli targets. So clearly there is a concern, there is fear that this war could escalate. We know that the communities in the north of Israel have been evacuated. You still have 21,000 Israelis from the northern regions living in hotels in the rest of the country because returning home is simply not safe. The fear is that that conflict and those tensions could escalate to all-out war.
Alex Cadier in Sderot, thank you for those updates. Now, trucks carrying humanitarian aid have entered Gaza on Monday through the Rafah crossing. The United Nations has warned of a looming famine and complained of obstacles in getting aid in and distributing it throughout the Palestinian enclave. Israeli officials say they have increased aid access to Gaza and they are not responsible for delays, and the aid delivery inside Gaza is the responsibility of the UN and humanitarian agencies. Israel has also accused Hamas of stealing aid, a charge Hamas denies. On to Europe now. The continent's largest nuclear power station, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, was again the target of strikes on Sunday, significantly increasing the risk of a major nuclear disaster in the region. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, the blame game very much on after this attack?
That's right, Tanvi. It very much is, as you say, with Russia claiming after this incident that world leaders should respond now, it says, to the Ukraine's alleged attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, calling it, in Russia's words, nuclear terrorism. Rosatom, which is Russia's state nuclear corporation, claims that Ukraine carried out 3 drone attacks on Sunday. The first, we're told, injured 3 people near the site canteen. The second attacked a cargo area. And lastly, the dome above one of the plant's reactors was targeted as well. Ukraine has denied any involvement. The International Atomic Energy Agency has condemned the strikes, saying that they endangered nuclear safety and confirming the serious physical impact of the drone attacks on the plant. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has called the attack a terrorist activity and said it was a dangerous provocation. He's also warned Kiev of negative consequences.
This is very dangerous provocation. IAEA staff who were on site were able to witness the attacks. This is very dangerous practice that has very, very bad negative consequences in the long term. Unfortunately, the Kiev regime continues its terrorist activity.
India's Dasha Chernyshova sent us this report with more from Moscow.
Well, certainly there are many concerns with regards to the safety and security of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest one in Europe. The understanding in Moscow is very clear. It is Ukraine that is responsible for attacking the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. However, those reports could be completely different from the Ukrainian side. Now, what we are hearing is that Ukraine has attacked the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant using kamikaze drones. According to the Russian officials, they have attacked its nuclear reactors number 5 and number 6. 3 people working at the nuclear power station have been injured, according to the Russian officials, and the IAEA has also confirmed that they have seen at least 3 direct hits against the infrastructure of the nuclear power plant. To this moment, the situation is stable. No significant damage has been done to the nuclear power plant. However, Moscow has been also calling on the international community to call on Ukraine to stop what it calls nuclear terrorism. So to this moment, the understanding is that as long as Ukraine continues to attack the nuclear power plant, the risks of a nuclear disaster are running high. At the same time, Moscow insists that the IAEA cannot really say, because of its mandate, from which side those attacks are taking place. And what is needed in the long term is obviously to have the peace negotiations between these two sides in order to make sure that these attacks do not happen in future. But Moscow has been insisting that its presence of its troops, of its military on the side of the nuclear power plant is paramount to keep the security of the nuclear power plant.
Russia on Monday launched more than 24 drones in an overnight attack on Ukraine, damaging critical infrastructure in the central Zhytomyr region. 17 of 24 drones were downed by Ukraine over the regions of Odessa, Mykolaiv and Zhytomyr, and a Russia-launched Kh-59 guided air missile was also destroyed. A logistics and transport facility and a gas station were damaged in the southern region of Odessa. Russian state media says more than 10,000 homes have been flooded across the country. Russia's been affected by the worst floods in decades since Friday, after snow melt caused a burst through a dam embankment in the city of Orsk. Authorities say more than 6,100 people have been evacuated from the city, and at least 15 schools are flooded in the region. Further measures are being taken to evacuate residents from affected areas. Germany has sent off the first 20 soldiers on a permanent deployment to Lithuania. It came after the two countries agreed to station a German brigade in the Baltic state late last year. During a farewell ceremony at Berlin airport, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said it was the first time that the country is permanently stationing such a unit outside Germany. The Kremlin says the German military presence in Lithuania will escalate tensions. At least 94 people have died after a ferry sank off the north coast of Mozambique. Officials in Nampula province say 5 people were rescued of the 130 believed to have been on board. Over 24 are reported missing. Passengers were trying to escape the mainland because of panic caused by disinformation surrounding a cholera outbreak. The boat was apparently travelling from Lunga to Mozambique Island off the coast of Nampula. DD India's Isaac Lucando sent us this report from Dar es Salaam.
Officials say 2 of the 5 survivors are currently receiving treatment in hospital. They say an investigative team is diligently working to uncover the causes of the boat disaster. Reports indicate that the converted fishing boat carrying approximately 130 people encountered trouble as it attempted to reach an island off Mozambique's Nampula province. Most passengers were fleeing the mainland due to panic triggered by misinformation about cholera outbreaks. According to the government of Mozambique, there have been nearly 15,000 cases of waterborne diseases and 32 deaths since October. Nampula is the worst affected region, accounting for 1/3 of all cases. Recently, the province has experienced a surge in refugees fleeing jihadist attacks in neighboring Cabo Delgado. The ill-fated boat was en route to the island of Mozambique, a historic coral islet that formerly served as the capital of Portuguese East Africa and lends its name to the nation. Isaac Lucando in Dar es Salaam, reporting for DD India.
British and French guards have swapped roles for a changing of the guard ceremony on Monday to mark the 120th anniversary of the Entente Cordiale. Grenadiers of the British royal household and the French Guard marched at the Élysée Presidential Palace in Paris. And Tanvi, French President Emmanuel Macron and British Ambassador to France Mena Rawlings watched British guards taking part in the ceremony.
Also tell our viewers what Entente Cordiale is all about. Signed in 1904, the Entente Cordiale Accord is a series of agreements which settled former disputes and significantly improved relations between the countries. This is the first time in the history of the Élysée Palace that foreign troops were invited to take part in this military ritual. Thank you, Ollie Barrett, joining us all from London. Still to come on DD India Global. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warns Chinese banks not to provide financial support to Russia in its war effort. And millions across Mexico, the United States and Canada await the total solar eclipse later today.
As the cycle of accountability returns, the time has come when the biggest democracy chooses to write another chapter in its glorious history. Development, justice, regionalism, a big political canvas. Everything will be put to test in this mega battle for glory. DD India dissects what makes elections 2024 the battle royale in Indian politics. Data and analysis free from bias to help you understand why India matters. The Great Indian Election on weekdays at 8:30 p.m. only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Next, we bring you stories in the run-up to the world's largest democratic elections in India. So a wave of political activity has been ignited across India, with parties scrambling to secure victory. Prime Minister and senior BJP leader Narendra Modi, after a day of campaigning in eastern states of Bihar and West Bengal, is now holding a public meeting in Chhattisgarh's Bastar region. Speaking at the rally, Prime Minister Modi lashed out at the Congress party for betraying the youth of Chhattisgarh.
छत्तीसगढ़ में कांग्रेस के भ्रष्टाचार पर आज कड़ी कार्रवाई हो रही है। यहां के युवाओं को जिन्होंने धोखा दिया है, उनकी तेजी से जांच चल रही है। हम नाराज होकर ये लाठी से मोदी का सिर फोड़ने की धमकी दे रहे हैं। मोदी गरीब का बेटा है, सिर ऊंचा रख करके चलता है। मोदी इनकी धमकियों से डरने वाला नहीं है। ये मोदी को कितनी भी धमकियां दे दें, भ्रष्टाचारियों को जेल जाना ही पड़ेगा। ये मोदी की गारंटी है।
Congress leader Rahul Gandhi is scheduled to hold 2 rallies in Madhya Pradesh today. Gandhi addressed a rally for Congress candidate from Mandla, Omkar Singh Markam, a former minister and sitting MLA from Dindori. Madhya Pradesh will vote in 4 phases on April 19th, 26th, May 7th and 13th. The central state of India accounts for 29 seats in the general elections. So as election campaigning intensifies in the southern state of Kerala, rift between the India alliance has been exposed, with accusations flying between Left Democratic Front and United Democratic Front leaders. Karnataka Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivakumar, campaigning for UDF, criticizes Pinarayi Vijayan's alleged immunity to central agency probes despite corruption allegations. He questioned why LDF Minister K. Krishnakutte, a JDS leader, remains in the cabinet despite JDS joining the NDA. Shivakumar challenged Vijayan to clarify if Kerala cabinet is LDF or NDA. Moving on, the Greek chief of the armed forces is in India on a 4-day visit. General Dimitrios Chopis was given a Tri-Service Guard of Honor in New Delhi today. Earlier, he laid a wreath at the National War Memorial in memory of the martyred soldiers. The Greek general has met the Indian Chief of Defence Staff, the Indian Navy Chief, Air Force Chief and Army Vice Chief. He is scheduled to visit a training facility in Agra, Pune Air Force Base and several facilities of the Indian private defence manufacturers. Still with Asia, Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. continues talks with China over an incident of water cannons in the South China Sea. China on Saturday attacked Filipino fishermen to prevent them from entering Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Marcos aims to prevent more incidents like these in the South China Sea with talks with China. Japan, the United States and Australia and the Philippines held a one-day joint maritime exercise in the South China Sea on Sunday involving aircraft and naval vessels exercises with communication activities and officer of the watch maneuvers aimed at improving interoperability among the four countries. The drill was held days before a summit between the leaders of Japan, the US and the Philippines on the issue of South China Sea. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Monday warned China that it will not accept new industries being decimated by Chinese imports. Yellen wrapped up her meetings to press her case for Beijing to rein in excess industrial capacity. This is on her second trip to China in just 9 months. During her visit, Yellen has complained that China's overinvestment has built factory capacity far exceeding the domestic demand, while fast-growing exports of these products are threatening firms in the US and other countries. She stated that in time, a newly created exchange forum will help discuss and resolve the excess capacity issue.
And when the global market is flooded by artificially cheap Chinese products, the viability of American and other foreign firms is put into question. And we've seen this story before. Over a decade ago, massive PRC government support led to below-cost Chinese steel that flooded the global market and decimated industries across the world and in the United States. I've made clear that President Biden and I will not accept that reality again.
US President Joe Biden will host Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida in Washington this week. Ahead of his visit, Prime Minister Kishida said that his trip to the United States would be important to show that his country's ties with the US are strong. The bilateral summit will see the two leaders discuss about economic cooperation and their mutual relationship. The meet will be followed by a trilateral summit between the US, Japan and the Philippines. Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will also be present in this meeting. And next we take a look at other stories making news around the world. South Korea's second homegrown spy satellite had entered orbit after its launch on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the John F. Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The rocket was launched at 23:17 GMT on Sunday. Equipped with a synthetic aperture radar, the satellite is capable of producing images regardless of weather conditions. Artists based in the United Arab Emirates have adorned Abu Dhabi with colorful murals. The project was launched by the Abu Dhabi Canvas Initiative to support local talents. Bus stops in various parts of the city were painted in bright and breathtaking colors. Artists dedicated up to 800 hours in creating their masterpieces. As stargazers gear up with excitement for the upcoming total solar eclipse on April 8th, a 63-year-old North Texas resident, Leticia Ferrer, prepares to witness her 21st total solar eclipse. Since 1991, she traveled around the world to see 20 total solar eclipses. She's a proud eclipse chaser or umbraphile. She also hosts an eclipse-themed podcast called Totality Talks. And now, as we end, let's enjoy the eye-catching visuals of the eruptions from Mount Etna of Italy. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do join us for another edition of the show live from Washington, D.C. at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram at DD India Live. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.